Crypto Week is coming soon to Washington, D.C., and we'll get you prepped and ready. Welcome back to the Crypto Corner on Schwab Network. I'm Jenny Horne, here to dive into all things Bitcoin and the world of cryptocurrency. Joining us this week is Adam Lynch, the director at Schwab Equity Research. And Adam, where we start is pretty much where we always check in on things, and that's the technical look at where Bitcoin's been trading. So walk us through some key levels you've been keeping on your radar.
Sure, let's take a look at the one-year chart. You can see that we're currently sitting at about 109,000 or so, near the all-time high that we hit back in May. We're above both of those SMAs, which is where we're likely going to see some support if the price starts to dip. It looks like that 50-day is up near 105,000 or so now. We generally think of that as the average price that an investor has paid for Bitcoin over the past 50 days. So as the price dips back down to it, some of those investors are likely going to see that as a buying opportunity, which is where that support comes from. Overall, Bitcoin's been on a very impressive run the last couple of months. The price is sat mostly above $100,000, even with a couple of 10% drawdowns. Just a few weeks ago in late June, it hit a near-term low when the price dipped below 100K for the first time in over a month. That drop was due to those escalating tensions within the Middle East, but Bitcoin quickly recovered from that, which I think was great to see, and it's had no problem trading above 100,000 ever since.
I think we're all hoping for that, because calm and some more boring nature of trading, I think, would definitely be welcome here. And now to speak to a name that is definitely no stranger to volatility is Strategy, of course, formerly known as MicroStrategy, making some waves this week as it did not acquire any Bitcoin for the first time in months, but it did announce this share offering to potentially buy a lot more soon. So tell us more about this.
Yeah, this was a really interesting one, which is pretty much what follows with MicroStrategy. There's always an interesting story going on there. But yeah, they announced that the first time since Liberation Day, essentially, they did not purchase any Bitcoin last week. That was that first week-long dry spell in a while. In addition, they did mention that, yeah, they're going to raise up to $4.2 billion with an issuance of new shares. So that is going to be money that they're going to use for general corporate purposes, including purchasing Bitcoin. Their current holdings now stand at about 600,000 tokens purchased for roughly 70,000 each. That is around $42 billion total in Bitcoin. And in terms of performance, the company said that it had some unrealized losses of nearly $6 billion in the first quarter of the year, but that reversed quite a bit in Q2. And for the period ended June 30th, they achieved unrealized gains of over $14 billion. So a lot of activity with them and a really fun one to keep our eye on.
Okay, and I did mention it at the top, but Crypto Week in Congress, let's get into that, because I have to imagine we'll see some waves and, again, some further movement as a result. So what do we really need to know?
Yeah, so this is a really cool one. After working their way through the big, beautiful bill over the past few weeks, the House is ready to turn their attention to other matters, particularly the big stack of crypto-related bills that are on their desks. So late last week, they declared the week of June 14th, next Monday, as Crypto Week. Hopefully, it's going to be a little bit more successful than the stop-start infrastructure weeks we saw during Trump's first term. The president wants a stablecoin and market structure bill on his desk by August. So the next few weeks are going to be a flurry of activity. Next week, we're focusing on 3 digital asset bills: the Genius Act, the Clarity Act, and the Anti-CBDC Surveillance Act. So the Genius Act is the one that got through the Senate last month with some decent bipartisan support. The vote was 68-30. That's going to be the first step towards essentially establishing a regulatory framework for stablecoins. So this one's really focused on stablecoins and their issuers. As we've mentioned a couple of times, these are those digital assets designed to maintain a stable value by being pegged to some sort of currency like the US dollar or euro or a commodity. Now the House gets their chance to make some changes to the bill, which will likely include some of the provisions that will try to make the Genius Act more in line with something that was called the Stable Act, which was a similar version of legislation that never made it to the Senate. I get the sense that neither side really thinks that this is the perfect bill, but both sides are very happy to be making this first step. The Clarity Act is the other one, which is essentially the House's attempt at creating a crypto market structure. So it's essentially going to try and divide the regulatory authority, putting more of it in the CFTC's hands and leaving, the equities and things to the SEC. It also establishes a factual definition for digital commodities, which is a big piece. And I think what this is going to be is essentially a fight between supporting financial innovation and trying to make sure that we're keeping investors safe and protected. And then finally, the last one is that anti-CBDC or Central Bank Digital Currency Surveillance Act. Think of this one as the middle child, right? Getting less attention than its older and younger siblings. It appears to have less bipartisan support than the other two bills, but it is an issue that Republicans feel strongly about. What this one does is it tries to block, essentially, the Fed from issuing or researching a federal digital currency. So essentially, there can't be any digital dollar issued by the Fed. Hopefully, these representatives of ours have been able to take a deep breath, rest up this week, because they've obviously got a really big one ahead of them.
Absolutely, and a really great breakdown on some of that incoming digital asset legislation or expected legislation in the coming week. We'll get more into Crypto Week headlines on the next Crypto Corner episode, of course. Thank you so much, Adam Lynch, as always, for his insight. For more, be sure to subscribe to Schwab Network YouTube channel. I'm Jenny Horne. We'll see you again soon.